Welcome back to the Palace. I'm your host, Crown Vic, and for this video, I will be talking to you about the dark side of self-improvement. The dark side of self-improvement. Before I get started, if you are interested in hearing discussions on spiritual topics, self-improvement topics, as well as just thought-provoking topics in general, then subscribe to the channel. I will be uploading more videos, ideally every week. We'll see. That's the idea. But for this video, I will talk to you about why perhaps I may not always be consistent with that idea, which is the dark side of self-improvement. So as you know, self-improvement, it's all about building on yourself. If you are weak, right? Just to give you an example, if you are weak and you're skinny, like I was once upon a time, I'm still relatively skinny, but not as skinny as I was. I used to be very skinny. If I turned to the side, I would disappear skinny. So until I decided to go to the gym and eat a little bit more and break out of that mentality, that skinny mentality. And that's what self-improvement is all about, breaking out of a certain mold and evolving beyond it. Seeing what I am weak in and becoming stronger in that aspect of my life. That isn't just that's not limited to only your physical aspect, your physical body. That could be dealing with your finances, your emotions, such as spirituality. And I always, interchangeably use spirituality with psychology because I believe that they're one and the same, essentially. It could also be with your, as far as self-improvement goes, it could be dealing with your education. But ideally, your self-improvement is all about your personal life. Improving your personal life, your relationships, improving your health, your wealth, and well-being, ultimately. That's what generally is known for, although self-improvement can go beyond that. And so the dark side of self-improvement is that there are patches where we are going back into our original patterns. Know thyself. As we take on this spiritual journey into self-improvement, it's very important for us to know ourselves. Know our patterns, know our behaviors, what is our triggers. And triggers, by the way, is more than just what makes me angry. Triggers could be also what makes me retreat, what makes me to go back into old habits that I wish to depart from. Kind of like being on a circle, like going in a circle. You thought you left this house that's burning down, and then you went downtown to stay in the hotel, only to miss that house and find your way getting an Uber ride and returning to that house that's burning down. That is pretty much like the slumps that we find ourselves in, the patterns that we cannot escape, even as we try to better ourselves. So consider an alcoholic, to kind of give you an example. An alcoholic that tries not to drink alcohol because they always find themselves taking it too far, overindulging. Unlike their friends who have a limit, like me, for example. If I were to drink alcohol, which I'm not a fan of, honestly, like for me, alcohol just doesn't taste good. Some people say, well, you're not really tasting the right alcohol. You gotta taste tequila. You gotta taste this drink because it doesn't taste like alcohol. Overall, alcohol it gives me a dirty feeling. Like just feeling drunk in general. It's not necessarily the alcohol itself. It's just the drink itself. You know, the intoxication of it that makes me feel dirty. And and not dirty as in a sexy way, but just dirty as far as I need to take a shower type of dirty. However, THC is a little bit different. So everyone is affected differently by certain slumps, or enablers, or can't think of a word for certain substances. Not even necessarily substances, but just certain okay, that's the word I'm looking for. Triggers that gets us back into our bad habits, right? So know yourself. Know what triggers you. Me, I am an INFP. INFP, well, I'm a combination between INFP, INFJ. So I'm like more like an X, an INFX. But I think I lean more towards INFP. So INFP pretty much is, if you heard of Myers-Briggs, if you never heard of it, you could Google it. Myers, that's M-Y, sorry. M-Y-E-R-S. Myers-Briggs, B-R-I-G-G-S. That's the Myers-Briggs test. I first heard about this test when I was in college, and I was taking this career class, and this teacher said everyone has a different personality, such as far as what careers is best suited for them. And so I took this test, and it turned out to be INFP. So INFP pretty much is someone who is spontaneous. They don't necessarily like schedules. They feel like schedules are rigid, and it just kind of, it's hard to follow for an INFP, because INFP, what that means is introvert. The N stands for intuition. The F means feelings. The P means perceive. But typically what P also stands for, but what is P is known for is spontaneity. So although it means perceive, such as nothing can be judged based off of hindsight. So you can't judge a book by its cover. We like to open up the book and read it, then see if it's a good book or not. So that's what pretty much the P means. Whereas if I was an INFJ, I would look at the book's cover, and I'll pretty much say whether that's a good book or a bad book, just based off of judgment. So know thyself. So me being an INFP, I know that there will be moments where I just cannot stick to a routine. I try to. I build schedules, and I may stick to that schedule for probably 1 or 2 days, maybe 3 days at max. And then somewhere down the line, I just I'm not inspired, so I need inspiration. And so me being INFP, I know that there are slumps. There are strengths and weaknesses to being an INFP. So me posting this video right now, that's spur of the moment type stuff. It's not something that I schedule, although I would like to post every week, especially when it comes to certain topics. But that's just not how my mind is wired. We are all wired differently. We all have different triggers. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, motivations, journeys, and setbacks. And that's why it's very important to know thyself. And while that's all a part of the self-improvement journey, to know thyself. But here's the thing about knowing yourself. Sometimes, at least in my experience, even if you know your triggers, that's not enough to prevent it. There are parts of us that identifies with the shadow. What do I mean by shadow? Why is this video called The Dark Side of Self-Improvement? So, if you are a spiritual junkie, And by spiritual junkie, I just mean that you are knowledgeable when it comes to spiritual topics. You may have heard of this term called shadow work. Shadow work, and I'm going to use my Snapchat's AI to kind of definition. So I asked my AI on Snapchat what is shadow. Sometimes the AI gives me good advice. Sometimes it doesn't. Some people say, "Oh, my AI gives me great advice." Sometimes a lot of times my AI says, "Sorry, I can't give you this information. Sorry, I don't know what that is." All right. I was surprised when they knew what shadow work was. But AI says shadow work is a spiritual practice that involves exploring and confronting the dark aspects of yourself, such as negative emotions, beliefs, and behaviors. Sometimes we identify with this shadow. Sometimes the shadow has been there for us when nobody else has. If you are a fat person, for example, people are yelling at you, people are bringing you down. The only thing that seems to give you comfort and be your friend is food. So you identify with food. The aspect of eating, consuming that food gives you comfort. For me, my shadow self is a little bit different, and I don't want to go too deep on that because it's more of a personal matter. But ultimately, what I end up doing was indulging in activities that make me get back into the slump. So here's the pitfall of self improvement. Sometimes we feel that we came to the point where we are mentally stronger than we were. Oh, I haven't drank alcohol in a year. It won't hurt if I drink alcohol just one time. Just one cup. Just one cup of alcohol. I see my friends do it. They seem alright. That he's living his life. She's living her life. Everybody else is doing it. And it's not really affecting them. But you know that if you do it, you're going to overdo it. You're going to end up leaving this club on a stretcher. It happened before, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but it happened over and over and over and over and over again to you for the past several years. So it's not just a one incident that happened. It's something that happened to you over and over again. So you know that it affects you quite differently than everybody else. But you have been sober for a year. You haven't drank or touched alcohol in a year. So you feel like I am mentally stronger than I was last year, so I will indulge. It's okay. I'm here with friends and it's boring and I want to have a good time. I'm just going to get one drink. And guess what? That one drink, that one cup turns into 2, turns into 3, turns into 4. The dark side of self-improvement. You think you overcame certain setbacks that set you back, but you didn't overcome it. You haven't overcome it. You have to understand that what affects other people, what doesn't affect other people, probably will affect you. Like me, if I were to drink alcohol, I wouldn't care for it. But if you are an alcoholic and I gave you the same alcohol that I drank, you probably want more until you are out of it. If I were to eat food, I'm not going to sweat it. I could eat probably one potato salad. That's not a good. Or maybe a slice of pizza. But if you are the fat person who overindulges in food, you're going to want not just one slice. You're going to want about 15 slices. The dark side of self-improvement is when you think you overcome your shadow, but your shadow is there waiting. But this doesn't mean that your shadow is bad. It just means that you have to understand it. So in the spiritual community, or even in shadow work, I think it's a different coin term in the spiritual community, but it comes from, I think it's Freud, the psychologist. I have to look this up. I don't have everything on me, and I think it's actually Carl Jung. Sorry. So Carl Jung came up with the term that every one of us has a shadow aspect to us, right? So, but this shadow aspect of us is not meant to be destroyed. It's meant to be integrated. If you were to look up, Till Swanship goes more deeper into this. So a lot of these spiritual teachers are out here. I don't claim to be a spiritual teacher. I'm just sharing my experiences. But I will manifest. Say, for example, if I want to be a spiritual teacher, I manifest that, and that's the power of manifestation. People don't understand how powerful this is. And here's the thing too. How the dark side of self-improvement is knowing, right? It's not just enough to just know your your shadow self, but guess what? If you focus on your shadow self, your shadow becomes bigger. But it's not even ignoring it either, because if you ignore your shadow self, then it will fester up and then it will make itself known. So what do you do about the shadow self? So if you ask, someone else who is deeper on this topic, they'll say integration. Integration. But you have to understand how to do integration, because you can't just, all right, I'm gonna indulge in this alcohol and integrate it into my life. It's more to it than that. So the dark side of self-improvement is thinking that you overcome certain things because you are in a different space than you were then. Be careful. Be careful, be careful, be careful, because that trap is still there, and that trap still works just as well. And if you are where I was, where I felt those negative emotions from the shadow, such as shame, I think they say, as far as dealing with that, you have to understand what makes you get there in the first place. So if you are alcoholic, what made you turn to alcohol in the first place, or addicted to food? What turns you to food in the first place? Is it certain people while you were growing up that make you feel like you were nothing? And then you have to meditate on that aspect of yourself and show that aspect of yourself love. It's okay now. You no longer need food. You no longer need alcohol to function correctly. But I think it's also more to it. So I'm going to give you my own personal experience, how I not only got into the shadow, but how I overcame it. So you have to recognize where you are. So this is what they'll tell you in treatments. You have to recognize where you are, and then by recognizing where you are, you're shining a light on the shadow. Then you have to start focusing on where you want to be. It's all about law of attraction. If you find yourself in the slumpy stage, understand this. It's nobody else's fault. And I want you to understand how powerful law of attraction is. Now, there's this new trend. I wouldn't even say it's a new trend. It's been going on for the past 10 years, if not more. But they talk about this thing called New Age to Jesus. New Age to Jesus. People in the spiritual community, they're trying to turn you away from Jesus Christ. They're trying to tell you that you're God, but there's only one God. They're trying to tell you that this law of attraction, it can give you anything it wants, and it works. It's like magic. They warned you about this in the Bible. Listen, all you're doing at that point is you're using the law of attraction. You're literally using the law. Whether you realize it or not, you always are using the law of attraction. You're using the law of attraction to brainwash yourself into this false religion. I'm sorry, it's a false religion. If you're a Christian and if you're watching this, then I can't. Well, I say I'm sorry, but I really am not sorry. I'm unapologetic about this because, like, when I hear Jesus, I cringe because first of all, that wasn't even his name. The J it wasn't even around back then, over 2,000 years ago. J was invented within the last few hundred years. So you are calling upon someone that's not even that person's name. Not only that, but he's linked. The Jesus story is linked to several stories. So it's not just one. So if you were to look this up, someone is on YouTube trying to debunk the myth around Jesus, such as Horus being very similar, or the guy from Zoroastrianism being very similar to Jesus. And so they debunk all that because they say, well, it's parallel, but it's not exactly the same thing like Jesus Christ. But here's the thing. Jesus Christ is not based on just one story. So it's several stories that's based on Jesus Christ. And they put it all together to create this myth of Jesus. Now, if you were to look up someone else named Billy Carson, he goes into how Jesus actually was a person. Alright, he wasn't named Jesus, it was Yahshua, of course. And so Yahshua was a person who learned from the Egyptian mystical school. So all those things that Jesus did, those miracles, quote unquote miracles, is miracles that any of us have the ability to tap into. So Christ is within all of us. Christ consciousness, that's also something that the New Age of Jesus movement is going to try to say that that's not true. But it is true. Alright, you're just using the law of attraction to gather more people who think like you to confirm your biased beliefs. But you're using the law of attraction whether you realize it or not. You can try to reject it, but you're always going to be using the law of attraction. And I understand this. In dealing with the self-improvement, the dark side of spirituality, or the dark side of self-improvement, is you don't want to get in the slump of not just falling into the shadow, but feeling bad about yourself. You feel like, I literally got into this slump, right? Where I said, maybe I deserve to be here. Maybe this is who I am. And that's when I started to imagine myself always being this way. Always being in the shadow. But the shadow is just an aspect of yourself. Your negative parts of yourself. Not necessarily to destroy, but something to integrate into the light. You shed a light on it. So the light. What I mean by the light is you're consciously acknowledging it. So you're saying this is almost like acknowledging that you're an alcoholic. The only reason why the shadow will have a hold of you being an alcoholic is if you always say that you're not an alcoholic. You constantly are in denial. But the first step to overcoming the shadow is to shed a light on it, shine a light on it. And to shine a light on it is to acknowledge it and to admit what you are, where you are, and then find a way to get out of that slump. And that's where I found myself. Self-improvement gives you the idea that you have evolved beyond it, but that entrapment will always be there. So you have to be wary of the entrapment. And if you do fall into that slump, which maybe you will, I have several times, and despite me knowing that it is a trap, I always find myself falling right back into it. And here's the kicker. It's not about falling down. It's about getting up. And you don't want to fall down and then feel like you deserve to be down there. Don't do that. Because what you're going to end up doing is use this law of attraction, which is a tool. It's a tool. It's a psychological tool. I want you to understand this as well. This law of attraction is proven. Scientifically proven. They literally have inventions out there that you can use your mind, almost like telekinesis, to engineer. They engineered this car to run on your thought frequencies. It's scientifically proven. Your thoughts literally can give commands. So you're literally telling the universe what you want. Now some people deny this stuff, but if you deny it, well, you just lost. You just lost. But it's like a tool once again. It's like having a loaded gun. You can use the loaded gun to protect yourself, or you can use that loaded gun to hurt yourself. But that loaded gun will always be attached to your hip, and it's gonna be used whether you realize it or not. And it's not really a good analogy to use, but that's the best one I could come up with right now, because law of attraction really is the tool, but it's unlike the loaded gun. It's something that you're always using. You're always using the law of attraction even while you're dreaming. There's not one moment, not even after you die, that the law of attraction is not being used. Law of attraction literally is how your soul moves around, quote unquote moves, because you don't really move, you attract things to you. So if you find yourself in the slump, the dark side of self-improvement, if you want to get out, start looking and reminding yourself of where you want to be, how you want to feel when you're in that moment, and use that law of attraction to get yourself out. When I found myself in that slump where I felt burned out, I literally turned off all self-improvement videos. I didn't want to hear nothing else about law of attraction. I didn't want to hear anything else about self-improvement, anybody else about working hard, anything else about any of that stuff. That's why I shut down my social media. I didn't want to be anywhere near it, because I had these negative emotions that kept me there. But you have to get yourself out. Sometimes you have to isolate yourself from that shadow in order to overcome it. So this has been Crown Vic talking to you about the dark side of self-improvement. Now, I don't know how many people are going to watch this video, if anyone's going to watch this video. It doesn't really matter, because at this point, I'm just kind of speaking from my own therapy, because I realize that as I was speaking, that I'm like feeling better about certain things. And that's what it's all about, you know. And if I help someone out there with this message, then I'm glad. If you watch this whole thing, leave a comment. Like the video, share it, comment on your journey. Have you experienced your shadow self? Have you fell down into the pits of life? What did you do to overcome it? And how did you get back up? Because at the end of the day, it's not about falling down, because we're all going to fall down. Even me at this point, I may have said all of this, but that don't mean that I'm not going to fall into the entrapments of life again. But it's not about falling down, but it's about getting back up. We can try to make preventative ways so that we won't fall down, but we're only human. It's all about getting back up.